This is the Criterion Creeps podcast, and tonight we're talking about Naked Lunch from 1991, directed by David Cronenberg. The tagline for this film, RJ, exterminate all rational thought.
Okay.
Blank-faced bug killer Bill Lee and his dead-eyed wife Joan like to get high on Bill's pest poisons while lounging with beat poet pals. After meeting the devilish Dr. Benway, Bill gets a drug made from a centipede. Upon indulging, he accidentally kills Joan, takes orders from his typewriter-turned-cockroach, ends up in a constantly mutating Mediterranean city, and learns that his hip friends have published his work, which he doesn't remember writing.
It's like Stephen King with Cujo.
Just like.
He doesn't remember it.
That came to mind.
It was just written one day. It was just printed and on his desk. He's like, oh.
So
cool.
how does Naked Lunch measure up to Cujo?
Well, I've never read Naked Lunch, but I did watch a movie on it. So I'm an authority, right?
Kinda. Maybe.
Kind of?
So right here, RJ, I have a copy of Naked Lunch.
You own it?
The first paperback edition of the complete $6 Grove Press bestseller with Massachusetts Supreme Court decision and excerpts from the Boston trial. Norman Mailer writes, the only American novelist living today who may conceivably be possessed by genius.
Conceivably. You know, there's a lot of people talking about William Burroughs' genius, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but everyone was awful convinced, hey?
Well, on the back here, we've got Terry Southern, who says, an absolutely devastating ridicule of all that is false, primitive, and vicious in current American life.
Do you know what else Terry Southern had to say about Mr. William Burroughs?
What else did he have to say in that documentary you watched?
Well, we can talk about that at the end, but Terry Southern, he proclaimed that Bill Burroughs was the big daddy, the daddy of all of them.
Yeah.
Who? All of them.
Well, also over here, RJ, I have this book.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you can see that. So this is Research, the sort of kind of high-quality book zine culture that came out of Search and Destroy that V. Vale wrote. This particular issue, volume 3 or 4, it doesn't have the number on it. It features William S. Burroughs, Throbbing Gristle, whose lead singer, Genesis P. Orridge, just died in the midst of the whole COVID-19 pandemic. So it's kind of been slid over. And Brian Geeson, William S. Burroughs' good, close personal friend, writing partner, and also builder of the Dream Machine. You know about those Dream Machines?
I know about all the stuff you were just talking about.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
And based on all this paraphernalia and merchandise you have, you must be a pretty big Bill Burroughs fan.
Am I? Well, RJ,
that's how it appears.
At some point in my life, in my digging through, this counterculture shit back in the day, I was kind of intrigued by this idea of cut-up method. Did you happen to look that up this week, RJ, in preparation for this William S. Burroughs themed episode by our Creepsville citizen, David Cronenberg?
I mean, I looked into some things. I watched a documentary called Burroughs, the movie.
That's not too bad. It's not too bad.
So I did some digging. I was trying to find some more stuff. I looked into old Bill himself, and I know a little bit about those Beat era guys. I've seen a few movies.
Well, there's a lot of little tips, little crossovers here. We have two Creep alumni. We've got David Cronenberg, obviously, of Dead Ringers fame. We have Peter Weller of RoboCop fame. These are all the first 25.
There's more than that even. What about Bob Hoskins?
Bob Hoskins.
And
Ian
what's
Holm.
his name?
Ian
Roy
Holm.
Schneider? Roy Scheider?
Scheider?
Well, this would be his first appearance, right? Until all that jazz?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I was thinking of what we've seen. Ian Holm was in...
Ian Holm.
Yeah, was in Brazil.
I always get Ian Holm and Bob Hoskins.
I was kind of like, what are you talking about?
I meant Ian Holm.
And Julian Sands.
Julian Sands? Is that guy who did WikiLeaks?
Not unlike. He kind of looks like him.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
Warlock.
Cool. Warlock?
Warlock himself.
Oh, that Julian Sands.
Yes.
Interesting.
So anywho, so Naked Lunch is a movie that I have only seen once before this week. And obviously the main reason I would have watched it was I was obsessed with that David Cronenberg. I was tracking down all his movies on VHS, and it was just like, oh, hey, there's another one. And there's this one called Naked Lunch. What a fucking weird title that is. And I'm like, isn't that the name of some book? And sure enough, it was. But it was always the one that I was like, well, I don't know what this is about. It's based on some weird-ass book, apparently, and it's supposed to be unadaptable. So it didn't sound like it was like the horror stuff that Cronenberg had become famous for. So again, it's like, well, So then one day I watched it, and I honestly don't remember anything about watching that movie, though I did watch it way back when. Sure. So even like the visuals in this, I kind of remember like stuff about like Tangier and Peter sweatiness. It's like there's sex, but there's really no sex in this movie. It's
sexuality.
There's sexuality. There's insect centipede monster rape.
Sure. The threat of rape is ever present in this thing.
No.
Yeah, as I know you know about.
So watching this again, like I think last week I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, I'll be curious to revisit this, but I wasn't super excited about it because I know I always was like in my mind it had been set in stone. Like this is definitely lesser Cronenberg. Lesser Cronenberg. But I will say that upon revisiting it, I don't know if it's just because we've just been watching so many black and white movies of late. Watching this like relatively contemporary movie from 1991, it looks so good. This movie looks amazing. Like the lighting is so great. The actual like the film stock, the color, like movies don't look like this at all anymore. They I don't know, because we just watched like The Circle Rouge not that long ago, and that's like 1970 and is very desaturated. This though does not shy away from color.
Yep, I'm with you 100%, my man. I almost exactly the same experience. Like, I'll get to it later when I talk, but like when I first watched it, I was like, meh. But now I think definitely because what did you say? 12 out of the last 14 were black and white. The things that. Something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty damn close to that.
So
Tokyo
this
Story,
like
I think it was like 12. And so coming to like watch something, it's like watching color. I don't know. It sounds so stupid to be like, because I know people are going, you only like to watch, you don't like watching black and white movies, huh? It's like, well, week after week, it wears on you.
Especially when like a lot of them are subtitled too. Like after you watch like 10 black and white subtitled movies in a row, you're kind of like, I would like.
Imagine if we were living in the 30s.
Oh,
imagine if it was 1919 with the Spanish flu.
Oh, jeez. Well, any movie at that point would have been a marvel, no?
The cinema dazzling our eyes.
It was dazzling. Yeah, it'd be like Sister Act but back then.
So, yeah, going into this, I've still. I mean, as I said, I own a copy of Naked Lunch. Have I successfully read this book? No. Because it is it's something
challenging.
It's a style of writing. It's a book about the writing rather than a plot. The Wikipedia entry for this is for the recap of the novel, which barely even has like an idea. This movie Cronenberg has a pretty great idea. He's like, this book is unadaptable. So what about we take like Burroughs' life and we kind of make this like semi-autobiographical thing, lace it through the Naked Lunch story, bring in like Junkie, bring in his other stories and stuff like that, and we'll just make up our own goddamn thing. And it's still very Cronenberg. Because especially when it comes to the end of this movie, where there's like sort of like a sinister plot.
The Interzone agents, right?
Right, and then like just like the men in women's suits and the people suckling at head protrusions and drinking down jism. Was it Mogwai jism? I believe. I'm not sure how many times jism has come up in the Criterion Collection at this point.
Only when you've brought it up. I don't think I've ever.
Maybe Chasing Amy.
Yeah, I don't even know if...
Fear and Loathing, maybe.
Oh yeah, Fear and Loathing. It's definitely mentioned in that little infomercial that he's subjected to. But I mean, I think you bring it up almost weekly.
Right.
Maybe that's off air. I don't know.
Yeah.
So wait, what were you getting at there?
Oh, just like what David Cronenberg's relation to this subject matter.
Oh, okay.
Because he's got these guys. You have on one side you have William S. Burroughs, who clearly he probably read, and I don't know if influence is right, but he definitely was thinking about that. Because on the other side you have J.G. Ballard, another science fiction-ish writer who Cronenberg definitely loved. So, I mean, he's just like, this is all the nebula that he's exploring. And so he makes this Naked Lunch movie, which apparently cost at the time $18 million to make, and was not a box office smash.
It wasn't?
Can you imagine?
You don't say.
I know. It's wild stuff. Do you remember the scene in The Simpsons where Bart, Milhouse, and Nelson get like a fake ID, and they go see I guess like an R-rated movie, and they go to Naked Lunch?
I pride myself in having a Simpsons encyclopedia in my brain for small little details and jokes like that, but I do not remember the Naked Lunch one. But
yeah. They go into the theater, and then like there's a time lapse, and they leave the theater, and Nelson, this is off the Wikipedia, looks up to the marquee and says, "I can think of at least 2 things wrong with that title."
He's not wrong.
Now, what do you make of the title Naked Lunch?
In the Burroughs documentary, it's lightly addressed to what that actually means.
Now, did they go with the Jack Kerouac interpretation?
No, they don't really talk about Kerouac in that thing. Like some of the other guys, like Ginsberg is in there quite a bit, but no, they were just kind of talking about like sexuality and what is that thing where you couldn't like publicly like talk about a lot of that stuff. So it was kind of like going against the grain with what was allowed and things like that. So that's how they describe it.
So apparently Burroughs states in his introduction for Naked Lunch that Jack Kerouac suggested the title, quote, "The title means exactly what the words say. Naked lunch, a frozen moment when everyone sees what is on the end of every fork."
Huh. All right, Kerouac. These beat guys are sure wacky, huh?
So how do you? Well, so I mean, did you pick up that the 2 guys that he's hanging out with were Jack Kerouac and Ginsberg?
Yeah. Well, so I have seen Naked Lunch before, and then it's like I said, I had a mild interest in the beat era guys for a while. So like I knew a little bit about their background, and then I did because I didn't get a ton out of it the first time I watched it. That's why I watched the Burroughs thing before rewatching Naked Lunch, because I was like, maybe this will kind of help explain things to me a little bit. And they don't actually talk about Naked Lunch that much, but it is all about Burroughs, which
is helpful.
In which you pointed out, like Naked Lunch is basically it's Naked Lunch and a biography about Burroughs. So like when I saw those guys, I was like, yeah, I know now. I probably didn't at first, but
yeah, I mean, when I would have watched this, I would not really have known about the beat guys at that point. That came a little bit later. So they were just like these characters. And actually, the one thing I noticed is like, hey, it's the guy from Da Vinci's Inquest. I don't know if you remember that TV show at all.
No, which guys in Da Vinci? Oh, just the actors themselves.
Yeah, the guy who's the Jack Kerouac character.
Right.
He's a character. Yeah, there's that TV show Da Vinci's Inquest, a Canadian classic. It's like it's like, hey, it's a nice little Canadian actor showing up here. So yeah, Naked Lunch of the film. Like I said, watching it again, it was a very different experience. And well, I don't think it's like top grade Cronenberg. I think it's a really good movie. Because it's bizarre. Like it is it's definitely a strange movie that is not going to be for everybody. But it seemed like this movie really did belong though to this era of like 91 of like cult movies coming out that were like, they weren't just like cheaply made kind of fun goofy movies. These are like kind of out there art house like cinema that was like beautifully photographed with like big name actors and like just kind of being willing to like take risks. And this movie does that with the beloved typewriter cockroach agents with their very suggestive sphincter holes.
What do you mean suggestive? That's their that's what they talk out of.
That's how they talk, out of their butts.
Yeah. That's all I got from it.
Yeah. Obviously.
Right?
Yeah.
What? Huh? Bugs? Yeah. Well, I mean, Cronenberg's a weird sex criminal, so what are you gonna do?
Would you describe this movie as cold? Because that's usually a description that people always use to describe Cronenberg.
I think this movie's hot, man. Everyone's sweating,
sweaty,
dirty, and gross.
Looking for their next opportunity.
I know that's not what they meant, but I don't really find it cold.
No, I mean, it's just
personally.
In our emails, one of our listeners alluded to the woodenness of Peter Weller.
Yeah, I mean, he's a little stinted in that sense, but I do think it kind of fits with all these things. Like, especially there's all that stuff about like the junkie aspect into it too, which at first book he made junkie and like all his life, and it's like, yeah, he I think he's like, that's actually him though, because when you see him talk, he is very like it's funny, all the people describe him and they're like, yeah, he's kind of a weird dude. He's really shut in, and he takes a lot to like get anything out of him, and he's always just kind of there, like not talking, just like looking out.
Oh yeah. So when you watch footage of him, he's that weird old man who talks like this.
So I do think Peter Weller, he is a little like wooden, but I think it's because that's just what Burroughs was like. He was kind of a weird guy.
And Peter Weller is kind of a wooden actor in general. Yeah. Like he has like sort of like a very restrained quality, I think, to everything I've ever seen him with. Mm-hmm. The other thing that made me pop into like this mindset of like what 1991 was like is because Judy Davis in this movie, she's also in Barton Fink, which came out in 1991.
Oh yeah. Yep. Barton Fink, eh?
Barton Fink.
It's a fun name for a movie.
Also a movie that Simpsons people go to.
Yeah, that one I do know. That one I do know.
It's got that John Goodman. That's what this movie is really missing at the end of the day, is John Goodman.
Could you imagine?
He brings the warmth, you know? So, what's this movie all about?
Fuck if I know.
It's kind of, I mean, if you try to like figure out what the machinations of the conspiracy are, these fictional intergovernmental factors using killer typewriters and strange technology to like outthink the other. Like it's kind of a spy story in some ways, but the other way there's like the autobiographical elements where William S. Burroughs, he's an exterminator, or as he's called in this, Bill Lee, the character name of Junkie, which is about himself. He finds out that his wife is using his bug powder, which is being supplied by a Chinese man, to get high. And he's like, well, maybe I'll try that too, I suppose. He talks to his doctor. He tries some harder stuff, has a real messed up hallucination, and he winds up playing out what actually happened with William S. Burroughs, which there's two versions of. That William S. Burroughs was playing a game of William Tell with his wife Joan and accidentally killed her in Mexico. But apparently he later told police that he was just like drunk, messed up, playing with the gun, and it just went off and he killed her.
They talk about it in Burroughs, and he's kind of like, he does the thing, he goes into the police station and then his lawyer shows up, and in the papers he was like, I have no recollection of what happened.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of game for a while. So I don't know, make of it what you will, but he killed her. So
he did kill her.
Yeah, no one can dispute that.
No. So she's dead, and Bill takes that trip. He goes off to Tangier, this interzone. It seems like in the book there's a lot more emphasis on Annexia, which we only really see at the very. We actually don't even see Annexia. It's like the end of the whole story, where everything kind of comes full circle in this sort of vague, nebulous way. that feels right. It's not like I don't think you could describe it as a satisfying narrative conclusion, because it's kind of hard to like figure out what is happening, but it feels like the correct conclusion in the sense that it's like, oh, I guess he's come to realize that he killed her and she's dead, that these aren't two separate women. This is all the same thing. And it's kind of been him escaping this reality, and it just ends at that. And he goes back to whatever the state of anexia is, and whatever one wants to interpret anexia being in a literary way.
What's the annex, right? It's like the index.
Yeah.
Right?
It's I don't know. I feel like it's a purgatory-esque.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that writing and authors in general? This movie's very like check out how crazy authors are, man. Look at the process.
Well, that was the idea, though. I mean, it is like the actual writing of this was process, like the whole cut up method, where you're like you write a bunch of stuff and then you literally cut it up and then you paste it together, and that's what you go with. I mean, it is about process and just like letting weird juxtapositions emerge and see what happens. And sometimes like, well, it's more interesting than what I was originally thinking. And you're like, oh, I see. It flies in the face of how like traditional thinking goes. I mean, it's literally, postmodern thinking about literature.
Postmodern Prometheus?
Exactly.
It's one of the best episodes of the X-Files. You ever seen it?
Not for a long time.
It's got Cher in it, dude. It's pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah, I was listening.
You were absolutely.
Yeah. No, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Continue on about Naked Lunch.
Yeah, so there is I'm trying to think of where to go with thinking about this movie.
You've done a pretty good job so far.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
Talked about how do you like the Howard Shore score? Which like you immediately recognize, and then up comes that jazz, and then you read Ornette Coleman worked on that.
I dig the jazzy tune, man. I think it fits pretty well with the whole vibe that they're going for. I like it. I like that. It's not Seinfeldy at all. Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit.
What else were we talking about? Oh yeah, Naked Lunch. So anyways, when you were talking about the author thing, the one scene that I think is like hilarious is when he comes back and his wife is with that guy and they're doing it, and then there's another guy just reading like spoken word at them. I think that's so funny for some reason, because it's like I don't know. I think it's a nice commentary on like those guys. It's like, it's kind of stuff I think you'd see like today in like an underground like art house, and there's like people like, I don't know, some kind of performance art, And as you know, art isn't real. So
well, I mean, this movie proves that both right and wrong contradictorily.
Sure.
You
I
dig?
just I do dig. I find that scene like hilarious just because of like the ludicrous nature of what's happening, and knowing that there are people who take that kind of thing very seriously and probably do that. And it's like, yeah. So anyways, I thought that was funny. Hey, this movie's got a cool, greasy aesthetic, doesn't it? It's like I said, it's all hot and sweaty, and everyone's like makes you feel like you're in Tangiers, dude.
Well, one thing that's interesting too is like it's clearly shot on a lot of sets, but it doesn't bother so much because it's I don't know. It feels like, because the movie, it feels like a construct. It feels like it's about like artifice, and like because of the drug addiction. And so like, I mean, the movie of like having the drug addict in like a real situation, there's lots of those movies that exist already. This is a fantasy. Part of it is about escaping real life, and be it like constructs of like, well, I'm going to be in this, like, you know, the heteronormative family, and I'm going to have my wife, and like I'm going to have my wife, and we're going to, like, she's going to make dinner for me, and I'm going to have my job. I'm not going to have time to write anymore because I don't need to. It's the best job I've ever had. I just kill bugs, and it's very self-explanatory. And like when you have to write for yourself, it becomes a lot more of a question, I guess, of like what that means.
It's so I just watched the baseball episode of The Simpsons, you know, with Ken Griffey Jr. and Daryl Strawberry. And there's that Mike Scioscia thing where he's just working in the nuclear power plant, and he eventually gets horrible like leukemia and cancer and radiation poisoning. But he was very much the same thing where they're like, don't you want to play on the softball team? And he's like, honestly, he's like, I kind of just really like that I have this job that there isn't this pressure to. He's like, I just kind of go about my day, and he spills the radiation waste, and he's like, they're like, no big deal, just keep going. And I think it applies to what you were saying. He's like, this is the best job I ever had. He's like, I go spray the bugs, and that's it. He doesn't have all that added pressure of, you know, being more, Jarrett.
That's right.
Isn't that what we all want at the end of the day?
I just one term unrelated to anything you just said that came above that I'm like, you don't hear that come up too often is Bildungsroman. It's
I am completely unfamiliar with that.
This apparently is it's a German word. It's basically about the coming of age story. That is that is like the term of following a protagonist from youth to adulthood. And I guess like someone used this term to describe this particular film adaptation, how it takes the Naked Lunch story that is kind of this shapeless sort of text, like with suggestions and vignettes, and kind of uses the Burroughs story as the framing narrative. And so in by doing so, it creates like this coming of age story, which some people have a problem with because it undermines the so-called beauty of Naked Lunch, which is considered one of the I believe it is on the list of 100 best English language novels from 1923 to 2005.
Can I tell you something? Yeah, I think those lists are horseshit because sometimes I've been burnt on a lot of those books before where everyone's like, it's the greatest book ever, and then I read it and I'm like, I don't like this. It's not good. You know what I mean, Jared? You know what I mean, Jared? I'm reading a book right now and it was like highly recommended, and I was like, I don't know, Jared. All these people with their opinions. It's like I said earlier in that documentary, they all talk about how they're like, we're pretty sure that Burroughs is the only real genius.
Right.
And you're like, why? I don't know. Was he?
So, what do you think about those Mugwai things?
The Bugmen?
Well, not the.
Are they called Mugwais? Isn't that what Gremlins is?
Oh yeah, it's like Mungwai or something like that.
Mungwai?
Yeah.
I think he's super cool. I think his head stuff is gross, like all the tubes that
they're just excreting.
Yeah, that are just excreting stuff. Like, I think that stuff's all wicked gross, but like, that's just Cronenberg, right? He's kind of a gross dude, isn't he? You know?
Well, he sometimes embraces the abject and the body, and that's just shtick.
That's just shtick. I think other than that, I think those guys are pretty cool. They'd work good in like a Hellboy book.
Yeah.
Just kind of like hanging out. I like him just hanging out at a bar. I think that's pretty neat. Because, you know, maybe he deserves a day off, you know?
Do you see yourself suckling at those dudes' head protrusions?
You
don't want to
depends.
Get down on that? I mean,
it's coming out of their like ranch or something?
Yeah. Yes. It's like watered down ranch.
Yeah. Oh. Like low fat ranch?
Yeah. Like 60% less fat.
60% less. Yeah, no, those dudes are cool, and I think the bugs are pretty neat. Like all the monsters are cool. The spine rape dick monster is a little weird, but you know. And what do you think about the birdcage? Like the society-esque shunting.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Type thing. What's your take on that guy?
On Julian Sands?
Yeah, just taking it all
consuming. I guess it's just like it kind of like because he's like this ultimate predator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, apparently this book also got into some trouble because of things like predatory men.
They did not like the frankness and depictions and descriptions of sex, which is yeah. I believe the book was banned in Boston in 1962 due to obscenity, notably child murder and acts of pedophilia, making it among the last works to be banned in the city.
Sure.
Oh, there you go. I feel like there's... Oh, actually, the one thing, fun fact, fans of Beat Generation literature, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker named the band Steely Dan after a revolutionary steam-powered dildo mentioned in the novel.
Yeah, those are pretty standard fare now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think, RJ, of Naked Lunch?
Well, since we're on all the sex stuff, so I was watching that Burroughs movie, and they speak pretty openly about that, like him and like his affairs with like the other Beat guys, like Ginsberg and stuff like that.
Right.
And it's interesting because they're like super open about it, but then they all have like a really similar experience, like. They were kind of like, yeah, and he was there, and we were in love, and then he's gone. And then, like, it goes to another guy who's like, yeah, and so, like, we had sex, and then we were gone. And it goes to another guy who's like, I've known Bill for 25 years, and you don't know Bill until you know Bill. And then he's talking to me, he's like, when Bill was in school, he was a lady killer. He was getting all the skirts. And they're, like, talking about it to, like, in front of a guy that, like, just openly was like, yeah, we had sex all the time. And he's like, isn't that right, Bill? Weren't you always chasing the girls? And he's like, yeah, I guess. And I was like, interesting. There's all these things.
Yeah.
All these things that exist with this guy and his sordid romances where no one seems to have like a bad opinion of him, but it's like, yeah, they were all experiencing things and sorting themselves out.
I wonder if his dead wife, what her opinion was.
Oh yeah. Well, actually, like, so the one thing I'll say is like, he kind of seems like a bad dude because like, so like one, he killed his wife. And then like all these other guys, they do kind of like, they speak like highly of him, but it's always kind of implied that like, he was like an older guy who they all like really admired, but then they all had like romantic relationships. And it's like, that could be anything, but you know, that depends on, it's like, was he like manipulating his power to like do things or something? He doesn't seem like it, but when you hear other people talk, and then there's a story of his son. So his son, like, he bailed on and like left him with his, parents, which I mean, people have reasons for doing things, but it was like, that's when he went to like Tangiers and stuff. He just kind of like left his son, and then he would send him like butterflies and like cool things from the jungle. And his son speaks like highly of him. He's like, yeah, dad just kind of had to leave. But then his son dies because he was a drug addict. And then you're kind of like they mention like the addiction stuff with his son in there. And I don't know, you see their like relationship, and it's very clear that haven't like spent any time together. So anyways, it just, all that stuff. I was like, Burrow, like everyone speaks so highly of him, but he kind of seems like a bad dude. Like, I don't know.
Problematic.
That's a good way to put it.
I mean, the thing is though, is like, there's like a whole generation of people that will like completely protect that legacy though, and like not question that sort of stuff. But I mean, even with as I mentioned before, Genesis P-Orridge, who died, like people, like, I mean, people are like, oh, Genesis P-Orridge, like what a great influencer and all these things like that. But it's like, well, apparently there's like I can't remember the name of her. She was part of the scene with him with Robin Gristle, and yeah, apparently it was like really fucked up stuff. Yeah. That like, oh, no one talks about that. And it's just like, yeah, we're in that period of time though where that's changing. And however that plays out over time, we'll see. But yeah, it's curious when you go back to these another generation and what their systems were and what their practices were. And yeah. I mean, like, because Burroughs got put on my radar from Grant Morrison, because Grant Morrison was like one of those guys that like would have held him up in high regard. As Burroughs was a practicer of chaos magic, and of course. So I mean, there's the your Phil Hines and such, Peter J. Carroll. They're all into him, and this whole thing. There's always that undercurrent of sex.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it be a positive force or perhaps a negative force, or one that you're just like in for a good time, and then you're out of there.
Yeah, I mean that's how it seems, right? Like, so it's what I was saying. Like, I don't really know how to draw Like, I'm not drawing conclusions out of it. But you do see, you see kind of like an equal side. It's like, yeah, they all loved him, but it's like, but what else was he doing? So, anyways, the last thing I'll say about Burroughs, just because I think it's funny, and then I'll tell you what I think of Naked Lunch, which I already have. But there's this really funny scene in Burroughs where he's showing them all of his weapons. So he's got like a blowgun, and then he's got like these like pellet guns, and then he's got big Bowie knives and like nunchucks and like a knife stick, and he like shows like a knife stick, and he's like, yeah, so if some guy comes up to you, you can pop him in the head with this. He's like, and if there was a blade on it, you just slit their throat. And then after all of his weapons, he's like, I don't really like violence. He's like, that's why I have these.
Yes.
And you're kind of like, what, Bill?
He made art out of like shooting at canvases.
I don't. Whoever made that documentary, I think they knew what they were doing with that, because it plays out really funny. Like he shows you about like 9 different weapons that he has, and he's like, yeah, I don't really like violence, and you're like, okay, sure. It's such a weird thing. Anyways, Naked Lunch. So I've mentioned a few times, like when I first watched it a couple of years ago, roommate Scott, he had the Criterion version of this. And so we watched it, and I wasn't super into it, even though I really even at that time, I really liked Cronenberg, but I was it was the story itself. I was like, I'm not super following this. I don't know a lot of like about this guy or any of these things. And then watching it this time, I definitely got more out of it, because I think I went in with a low expectation. I was like, yeah, I remember I don't like the story, but like the Cronenberg aspects are cool, so I kind of went to that stuff. I was like, yeah, I still like all the Cronenberg like practical effects and just the vibe that he sets in this thing. And then even though I'm the strongest proponent of how context shouldn't matter, knowing a little bit more about these guys definitely made the movie more accessible. But still, I don't think that's a mark of a good movie anyways, but it did help me at least. I was like, well, it's good to know I know all these things about Burroughs now, and I kind of know a little bit more. I do still think that like it doesn't bother me as much that the movie is kind of like goes between these two things. And even it sounds like Naked Lunch, the book, he says like, or Bill, like William Burroughs said himself, he's like, yeah, you can kind of read any chapter out of order because it doesn't matter. And I was like, okay, like that makes a little bit more sense now for all this stuff. Like it's just kind of just like biographical stuff, but then things that came off of that when he was all like doing his drugs and things like that. So I definitely think at the time that we're watching it, it plays better because, like we said, it at the end of a long run of things, it's such a stark contrast from what we've been watching lately, and it's like, man, a change of pace for a while.
What a change of pace!
What a change of pace. Yeah, and I like the Mogwai guys. I think the ending with their suckling farm is horrifying.
Yeah,
it's like
there's just dozens of them hanging off of chains.
It's like a hookah bar but with living creatures.
Yeah,
and so that fits in a lot with my personal viewpoints of humans.
Like, so the other thing too is like to do a shout out for Carol Spear, who's the production designer on this stuff that he's worked with, and it's like she just does amazing work. Oh hell yeah, man! Is she like for a lot of his stuff, or just this one? Yeah, let's see how long if she's still the go-to. But yeah, no, like Eastern Promises, History of Violence, she's still there. She's real good. When did she start? Dead Zone, Fly, cool. Dead Ringers, Naked Lunch, like all the way through. Canadian Bacon, Joe's Apartment, Blade 2. Oh, baby, this Pacific Rim.
This lady's defined my life, and I didn't know it.
Guillermo swept in on that too.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
You can tell Guillermo's like all over this kind of stuff.
Yes.
You know, stealing from other people. Right? I saw a thing where it was like Guillermo del Toro's movie filming canceled because of the COVID, and I was like, well, yeah. And everyone was like, I don't know. Everyone was like, let him make his movie, and I was like, well, guys, come on now. Yeah, no, I definitely got more out of Naked Lunch this time than last. So I'm with you where it's not like all other Cronenbergs I think are like so much better, but I think those movies, like some of his other movies, are just so good in general. It's like even though Naked Lunch is a bottom rung for him, it's like his movies are still better than a lot of other people's best efforts. So
yeah, see, actually, I think Naked Lunch is elevated for me because I mean. My controversial opinions is I don't know how much I love The Brood and Scanners.
Oh, okay.
Or Rabbit even. I think Naked Lunch is definitely like more in line with what he wants to probably make. But I mean, like obviously, The Fly, Videodrome, Dead Ringers, they're the echelons. But I think Naked Lunch is like that second tier for sure. But yeah, it's not definitely like some people consider his worst movie. I would have to take a look back and rewatch some stuff to get that opinion. And I mean, I'd say Naked Lunch is probably more along the lines of Crash, which is the movie that he bases off of J.G. Ballard that I mentioned before, that I was blanking out on. But
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. Yeah. What you got? Any other brain busters over there?
Just to talk about the people who hate this movie. Oh, actually, one other one is the other kind of little crossover to the Criterion Collection so far in our creep is Haxan, Witchcraft Through the Ages. Because the 1968 cut of this is narrated by William S. Burroughs and was distributed by this guy, Anthony Balch, who at one point was going to adapt Naked Lunch himself back in like the late 60s with Mick Jagger. But it never happened because I guess Mick Jagger took a turn on the project. And then at one point, Dennis Hopper was going to play Bill Lee as well.
I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, it's I mean, very different movie.
Oh well, what are you gonna do?
Nothing,
right? Nothing.
So who hates this movie?
I don't know.
I mean, I don't blame people. This is definitely not going to be for all, because this could go the way of a jubilee for some, probably, as we'll hear. Now Fell, the most recent lowest rating.
Okay.
Half star. Almost Cronenberg's worst. To its credit, there are some interesting scenes and props where Burroughs and Lynch are masters at reeling us into the subconscious. Cronenberg comes off as a babbling idiot, clearly too cowardly to be a recreation of the book by the same name. Naked Lunch is an attempt at an homage, but is merely an insult. It's a lot of claims, not a lot of evidence.
Yeah, so their favorite movies, I'll get to. They're pretty much what you would expect, but I'm just noticing some things in movies that they gave half a star to, Jarrett. Movies like King Kong, Platoon.
Say that again.
King Kong, Platoon, West Side Story, all half-star films apparently.
Oh, wow.
Same as The Straight Story, a half a star. Ooh. For some reason. Maps to the Stars, so they just don't like Cronenberg. Maybe
maybe that's Cronenberg's worst film.
Maps to the Stars,
no, which I have not seen.
Me neither. Maybe next time. They also gave High Noon a half a star, Jarrett. Small Soldiers a half a star. Dazed and Confused, Under the Skin, and Barton Fink are half-star films apparently.
Wow.
But their favorite films are Pulp Fiction, Clockwork Orange, 2001, and Apocalypse Now.
It's like a magnificent troll job.
Yeah, they have their bio says disclaimer. I tend to give lower scores to give more variance to the movies I really enjoy.
Oh.
So I guess there's that.
I see. Next up, half a star from Captain Farts. And Captain Farts simply writes, "What a festering turd."
Oh, yeah. That's
I mean, if anyone's going to know about turds, I mean, Captain Farts has got to be the guy.
Oh, that's the good stuff. I mean, Captain Farts might not be wrong. They gave Straight Story 5 stars,
Okay.
which is pretty cool. But they gave your favorite movie, Arrival, 5 stars also. But the big good David Lynch fan, Elephant Man, 5 stars. 5 stars to Akiru coming up next week. So they're not going to be back next week, boys and girls. 5 stars to Hook. That's pretty cool. But they don't have any favorite movies, but let's see if there's any other interesting half stars. Space Jam. So both of these people gave Space Jam a half a star, which I find that weird because it's like, I know some people don't like Space Jam, but like Space Jam's a pretty universally beloved movie, right?
It's cheese. I'm
Yeah.
sure I'll watch worse movies in my life. I've never seen Space Jam, and I'm going to continue not because I know it's not for me. I'm not an RJ. I'm not a child.
Yeah, they gave Dennis the Menace a half star too. So this person's just got bad opinions left and right.
One more. M.D. Perkins. Half a star. I already hate the source material, so pair this with one of my most suspect film directors, and you get a film I appreciate from a clinical distance, but strain to like it every moment throughout. Well, no shit, buddy.
Yeah. I think, what did they say? The most suspect directors, or what did they say? Something.
One of their most suspect film directors. So I guess they're always on the caution when it comes to Cronenberg movies.
They're not suspect or caution to Marvel movies, of which they give 5 stars. Like things like Doctor Strange.
Wow. Okay.
5 stars. I mean, there's lots of other movies like Criterion movies that they gave 5 stars, and weird. So this person and the last person gave The Fugitive with Harrison Ford 5 stars, both of them, which is real weird. Favorite movies: Making of, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Dick Tracy, Fata Morgana. Mm-hmm. I don't even know what that is.
That's Werner Herzog.
Oh, you could have fooled me. This person gave half a star to Bad Lieutenant. Bad Lieutenant, Jarrett. Half a star to I Am Sam. Half a star to Crash, the Cronenberg one, and Benjamin Button. Art School Confidential, half a star. It's weird, isn't it? I don't know. I don't even know anymore, Jarrett. Who knows, man?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? Man. Well, any final thoughts on this lunch?
It's sure naked. No, it's better on rewatch, I would say.
Yeah, no, like 100%. It's a movie that I didn't have much of a strong opinion of, and either. It was like, oh, really? That's the one that's in the collection. I mean, it's cool that Cronenberg's in there, but now watching it again, I'm like, this movie's like actually really good. Like, I don't know, I turned around. I turned around on this one. It's a rarity because usually it's the other way around.
Very true. Yeah, better on rewatch. It's still not up there with his best, but so there you go.
There you go.
There you go.
After the break, I don't know. RJ is going to get raped to death by a centipede monster played by Julian Sands, and he's going to like it.
Man,
but I'm sorry. I'm taking the bus. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. Gotta go back to Nexia. Shoot my wife in the head. It's too late.
Couldn't help yourself, huh?
Too late for you.
You just couldn't help yourself.